The moment a stranger decides your family does not belong, breakfast can become a test of character that no one ever expected to face. Saturday mornings were sacred inside Maggie's Corner Diner on the edge of downtown Norfolk, Virginia, where the smell of fresh coffee, sizzling bacon, and warm biscuits blended with quiet conversations from families beginning their weekend together. Marcus Reed preferred this little place because nobody treated him differently there. At 42 years old, the broad-shouldered black father carried himself with quiet confidence that came from years of discipline rather than pride. Wearing a simple charcoal polo shirt, dark jeans, and clean brown boots, he looked like any other father enjoying time with his wife and children. Across from him, Angela Reed smiled while helping 8-year-old Tyler spread butter across a biscuit that somehow seemed larger than his plate. 11-year-old Maya laughed as she teased her little brother for making a mess with strawberry jam, filling the booth with the kind of happiness that only families create when they forget the rest of the world exists. Marcus watched them with gentle eyes, grateful that moments like these could never be measured by rank, salary, or achievement. "Dad, are we still going to the aquarium after breakfast?" Maya asked with excitement. Marcus smiled. "That is the plan, as long as somebody finishes their pancakes." Tyler immediately took another oversized bite, making everyone laugh. Around them, servers greeted regular customers by name, while an elderly couple shared the morning newspaper near the window. Country music played softly from overhead speakers, and sunlight poured through the large front windows, painting long golden lines across the polished floor. It felt like the safest place in the city. Then the front door opened. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside for what appeared to be an ordinary visit. Most customers barely looked up before returning to their meals, but Officer Ethan Cole slowed as his eyes settled on Marcus and his family. Something in his expression changed almost instantly. His partner continued toward the counter, yet Cole remained near the entrance, studying the Reed family with unusual attention. Marcus noticed the glance, but calmly continued pouring orange juice for Tyler without saying a word. Angela quietly looked toward her husband, recognizing the subtle shift in the room. She had seen that look before. Marcus simply offered her a reassuring smile that silently said everything would be fine. Officer Cole walked toward their booth with measured steps, stopping beside the table as nearby conversations gradually faded. The friendly atmosphere inside the diner suddenly felt noticeably smaller. "Good morning," Cole said in a firm voice. "May I ask you a few questions?" Marcus looked up politely without the slightest trace of irritation. "Of course, officer. Is there something I can help you with?" Cole glanced around the booth before returning his attention to Marcus. "I received information that matches someone sitting here this morning." The statement caused several nearby customers to look over their shoulders. Tyler slowly lowered his fork, confused by the sudden interruption, while Maya instinctively reached for her mother's hand beneath the table. Marcus remained perfectly still. "Could you please tell me what information you received?" he asked respectfully. Cole did not answer immediately. Instead, he continued studying Marcus as though searching for confirmation of something only he could see. Outside, traffic rolled peacefully past the diner, completely unaware that inside, one ordinary family breakfast had quietly become the beginning of a story none of the people present would ever forget. Marcus Reed never believed that real strength was measured by how loudly a person could speak. He believed it was measured by how much peace someone could protect when everything around them invited conflict. As Officer Ethan Cole waited for an answer, Marcus reached for his coffee cup with slow, deliberate movements that revealed neither fear nor frustration. "I would be glad to cooperate, officer," he said calmly. "I only hope I understand what this is about." Cole studied him for another moment before speaking. "We received a report concerning a suspicious individual matching your description." The words settled over the table like an unexpected storm cloud. Angela remained composed, although Marcus noticed her gently placing a reassuring hand over Tyler's small shoulder beneath the table. Maya looked from her father to the officer, searching for an explanation that no child should ever have to seek during breakfast. Marcus offered both children the same reassuring smile he had given them after difficult school days, scraped knees, and frightening thunderstorms. It was the smile that reminded them everything would eventually be all right. "Could you tell me what exactly was reported?" Marcus asked respectfully. "That information is still being verified," Cole answered. "For now, I need to confirm a few things." Marcus nodded without hesitation. All right. The exchange remained polite, yet nearly every conversation inside the diner had quietly disappeared. Waitresses carrying coffee pots slowed their pace. An elderly veteran near the window folded his newspaper without taking his eyes off the booth. Even the cook briefly glanced through the service window before returning to the grill. The atmosphere had changed in a way everyone could feel, but nobody wanted to acknowledge. Susan Miller, the diner manager, stepped from behind the register after noticing the unusual silence. She recognized the Reed family immediately. They visited nearly every other Saturday, always treating employees with kindness and leaving generous tips regardless of who served them. Marcus was the customer who remembered birthdays, thanked kitchen staff, and patiently waited whenever the restaurant became crowded. She quietly watched from a respectful distance, hoping the conversation would end as peacefully as it had begun. Officer Cole glanced toward the family vehicle parked outside. Is the blue SUV yours? Marcus nodded. Yes, officer. Did you drive here this morning? Yes. Have you been anywhere else today? No. We left home shortly before arriving here for breakfast. Every answer came calmly, without defensiveness or irritation. Cole seemed almost unsettled by Marcus's composure, as though he expected resistance that never appeared. Meanwhile, Tyler leaned closer to his father and whispered, Dad, did we do something wrong? Marcus gently rested his hand on the boy's shoulder. No, buddy. Sometimes adults simply need to ask questions. We answer honestly, and we stay respectful. Tyler nodded, accepting his father's words with complete trust. Angela watched Marcus with quiet admiration. This was the man she had known for nearly 2 decades, the man who believed that character was revealed most clearly when nobody else remained calm. Outside, sunlight reflected across the parked vehicles, while ordinary weekend traffic continued flowing through Norfolk without interruption. Inside the diner, however, time seemed to move differently. Every passing second invited more curious glances from customers who could sense that something about the encounter did not feel ordinary. Officer Cole finally spoke again. Sir, I am going to ask you for identification. Marcus looked directly into the officer's eyes, his expression unchanged. Certainly, officer. My wallet is in my back pocket. May I reach for it? Cole gave a short nod. Go ahead slowly. Marcus moved exactly as instructed, carefully removing his wallet before handing over his driver's license without the slightest complaint. None of the people watching could have imagined that the ordinary piece of identification now resting in the officer's hand revealed only the smallest part of the man quietly sitting before them. Officer Ethan Cole examined the driver's license carefully, his eyes moving from the photograph to Marcus Reed's face several times before stepping a few feet away to speak quietly into his shoulder radio. The diner remained unusually silent. Coffee continued to steam from forgotten cups. Breakfast plates sat untouched, and every person inside seemed to understand that the morning had shifted into something none of them had expected. Marcus remained seated beside his family, folding his hands calmly on the table instead of allowing uncertainty to disturb the peaceful example he wanted his children to remember. Across from him, Maya studied her father's face with quiet concern. Dad, she whispered softly, why does he keep looking at you like that? Marcus answered with the same gentle voice he always used when teaching life lessons. Sometimes people do not have all the information they need, sweetheart. That is why patience matters. Tyler looked toward the police officer before turning back to his father. Will we still go to the aquarium? Marcus smiled warmly. That is still my hope. Angela reached across the table and lightly squeezed Marcus's hand for a brief moment. Neither of them needed words. Years of marriage had taught them how much reassurance could exist inside simple gestures. Nearby, Susan Miller quietly approached with a fresh pot of coffee. Would anyone like a refill? She asked politely, trying to restore a little normalcy to the room. Marcus thanked her with his usual kindness while Angela accepted another cup. Susan noticed that Marcus's breakfast had grown cold, but he had never once complained about the interruption. She quietly admired the dignity with which he continued treating everyone around him. Officer Cole returned to the booth holding the driver's license. Mr. Reed, dispatch has confirmed that your license is valid. Marcus nodded. Thank you, officer. Instead of handing the identification back immediately, Cole continued asking questions. How long have you lived in Norfolk? Almost 9 years. What do you do for work? Marcus answered without hesitation. I work for the federal government. The response was completely truthful, yet it revealed almost nothing. Cole narrowed his eyes slightly. Can you be more specific? Marcus maintained the same calm expression. I would prefer not to discuss my employment unless it is relevant to your investigation. Cole looked unconvinced. People usually answer simple questions without hesitation. Marcus responded respectfully. People also have a reasonable expectation of privacy when they have not violated any law. The words were spoken so calmly that they sounded less like an argument and more like a reminder. Several customers quietly exchanged glances. The elderly veteran near the window continued watching with growing interest, noticing the disciplined posture Marcus never seemed to lose. There was something familiar about the way he remained completely composed under pressure, though the older man could not yet explain why. Cole glanced once more at the driver's license before speaking into his radio again, requesting additional verification from dispatch. His partner, Officer Ryan Mitchell, finally approached from the counter carrying 2 cups of coffee. Everything all right? Mitchell asked quietly. Cole answered without taking his eyes off Marcus. I am still checking a few things. Mitchell looked toward the family sitting peacefully in the booth, then toward the curious customers surrounding them. He sensed the growing attention, but said nothing. Outside the large front windows, sunlight reflected across the parking lot as another vehicle slowly entered the diner. Inside, however, the atmosphere continued tightening with every unanswered question. Marcus remained exactly where he had been since breakfast began, never raising his voice, never challenging the officer, never forgetting that 2 young children were learning far more from his actions than from anything he could possibly say. Even so, one thought quietly settled into the minds of everyone watching. If every document had already been confirmed, why was the conversation still continuing? The silence inside Maggie's corner diner slowly became louder than any conversation could have been. Every customer had returned to eating only in appearance, because nearly every pair of eyes drifted back toward the Reed family within seconds. Forks rested against plates, coffee cooled untouched, and the cheerful country song playing through the speakers now felt strangely distant. Officer Ethan Cole still held Marcus Reed's driver's license as another response came through his radio, but whatever dispatch reported did not seem to satisfy him. He looked at Marcus again with the same cautious expression that had started this entire encounter. Mr. Reed, Cole said evenly, would you mind stepping outside with me for a few more questions? Marcus remained seated. He glanced first at Angela, then at Maya and Tyler before returning his attention to the officer. Officer, if I am not being detained, I would prefer to stay here with my family while they finish breakfast. His tone remained calm and respectful, without even the slightest hint of defiance. Cole folded his arms. I am simply trying to clear up a situation, and I would like to help you do that, Marcus replied. But my children have already become uncomfortable. I believe any conversation can continue right here. Maya quietly looked down at her pancakes, no longer interested in eating them. Tyler leaned closer to his mother and whispered, why does everybody keep staring at us? Angela gently brushed a hand across his shoulder. Because sometimes people forget that families deserve privacy too. Susan Miller walked carefully toward the booth carrying a fresh basket of biscuits. She hesitated before speaking. Marcus, Angela, I just wanted you to know that if your breakfast gets cold, we will gladly prepare another one. Marcus smiled warmly despite everything happening around him. Thank you, Susan. That is very thoughtful. Several nearby customers noticed that even now, he addressed everyone with courtesy. An older woman sitting near the front quietly shook her head. They were just eating breakfast, she murmured to her husband. Across the room, the elderly veteran continued observing Marcus with growing curiosity. Years of military service had taught him to recognize discipline that could not be learned overnight. Marcus never fidgeted. His breathing remained steady. His shoulders stayed relaxed without appearing careless. Most remarkable of all, his attention repeatedly returned to reassuring his children instead of defending himself. The veteran quietly wondered what kind of training produced that level of composure. Officer Ryan Mitchell stepped beside his partner and spoke softly enough that only Cole could hear. Everything is checking out so far. Cole answered just as quietly. Something still does not feel right. Mitchell glanced toward Marcus again. Or maybe we interrupted the wrong family. Cole did not respond. Instead, He looked once more at the identification in his hand before returning it to Marcus. "Thank you," Marcus said sincerely as he placed the wallet back into his pocket. "Am I free to continue breakfast?" Before Cole could answer, the radio attached to his shoulder crackled once again. Dispatch requested additional information regarding Marcus Reed's employment after another database inquiry produced restricted federal records that required supervisor authorization to access. Cole's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Restricted records were unusual, especially during what had begun as an ordinary field inquiry. He stepped several feet away to respond, speaking quietly into the radio while Mitchell remained near the booth. Marcus calmly poured another glass of orange juice for Tyler as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet everyone inside the diner sensed that something significant had just changed. Nobody knew what information Dispatch had discovered, but the atmosphere no longer carried simple suspicion. It carried growing uncertainty. Even Officer Mitchell now found himself wondering whether the quiet father sitting across from two nervous children was hiding wrongdoing, or whether he had simply been protecting a part of his life that very few strangers were ever meant to see. Officer Ethan Cole lowered his radio slowly, but the confidence that had marked his every movement since entering the diner was no longer there. Whatever Dispatch had just told him was clearly different from the routine responses he expected to hear. He glanced once toward Marcus Reed, then toward his partner, Officer Ryan Mitchell, before quietly stepping closer to the front entrance where the conversation could not easily be overheard. Even so, the expressions on both officers' faces revealed enough to keep every customer watching. Marcus noticed the change but remained exactly where he was, unfolding his napkin and encouraging Tyler to finish his breakfast while it was still warm. "Come on, buddy," he said with a gentle smile. "Those pancakes deserve a better ending than getting cold." Tyler managed a small smile before taking another bite. Maya looked at her father with quiet curiosity. "Dad, how are you staying so calm?" Marcus met her eyes with reassuring warmth. "Because calm minds make better decisions than worried ones. Remember that." Angela recognized the familiar lesson. Marcus had repeated those words many times over the years, whether helping the children through difficult homework, teaching them to ride bicycles, or comforting them after disappointments. They were not simply encouraging words. They were the foundation of the way he lived his life. Across the diner, Susan Miller quietly instructed another employee to refill coffee for several waiting customers while trying to restore the relaxed atmosphere that had disappeared nearly 20 minutes earlier. Instead, the silence seemed to deepen. The elderly veteran finally stood from his booth and slowly approached the register to pay his bill, but before leaving, he paused near Marcus's table. "Excuse me, son," he said respectfully. "I just wanted to tell you that you are handling this with remarkable grace." Marcus looked up and smiled. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that." The veteran nodded thoughtfully. "Not everyone understands that real strength can be quiet." Marcus simply answered, "Yes, sir." The older man smiled before leaving the diner, carrying with him an unmistakable feeling that he had just witnessed something important without yet understanding why. Near the entrance, Officer Mitchell quietly spoke to Cole. "Dispatch says those records are protected at the federal level. They cannot release additional information without authorization from his command." Cole frowned. "Command? What command?" Mitchell shrugged slightly. "They would not say. They only advised that any further verification should go through the listed emergency contact." Cole looked back toward Marcus, who was calmly helping Tyler wipe syrup from his hands with a paper napkin. The peaceful scene before him did not seem to match the increasingly unusual information arriving through official channels. After several long seconds, Cole walked back toward the booth. "Mr. Reed," he said in a noticeably more measured voice, "there is one final question I would like to ask." Marcus nodded politely. "Go ahead. Would you be willing to contact the emergency reference attached to your federal records so we can verify your employment status?" Marcus studied the officer quietly for a brief moment before answering. "I can certainly make a phone call if it helps bring this misunderstanding to an end." Angela looked toward her husband, immediately recognizing from his calm expression that he had already decided exactly whom he intended to call. Marcus reached into his pocket, removed his cell phone, and unlocked the screen with steady hands. He scrolled through only a few contacts before stopping on a number that he had not needed to use in months. Without drama, without anger, and without saying another word, He pressed the call button, unaware that the quiet conversation about to begin would change the direction of every life inside Maggie's Corner Diner before the morning was over. Marcus Reed held the phone to his ear while the quiet hum of the diner seemed to disappear completely. The call connected after only a single ring. "Good morning, Master Chief Reed," a composed voice answered. Marcus spoke with the same calm respect he had shown throughout the morning. "Good morning, Commander. I apologize for disturbing your weekend. I have encountered a situation that may require verification of my federal service." There was a brief pause before the voice replied, noticeably more serious. "Are you safe?" "Yes, sir. My family and I are completely safe. We are at a local diner in Norfolk. A routine misunderstanding has led to questions regarding my employment, and the responding officers requested confirmation." The commander answered immediately. "Understood. Please remain where you are. We will handle the verification." Marcus nodded, even though the other man could not see him. "Thank you, sir." He ended the call, quietly placed his phone back on the table, and resumed his seat without offering further explanation. Officer Ethan Cole watched every movement carefully. "Who was that?" he asked. Marcus met his eyes politely. "The emergency contact associated with my federal records." Cole waited for additional details that never came. "And what happens now?" Marcus answered with complete honesty. "Now we wait." The simplicity of the response somehow made the room even quieter. Angela reached for her coffee while Maya looked curiously toward the entrance each time a vehicle passed outside. Tyler had finally returned to eating his breakfast, reassured by the confidence in his father's voice. Across the room, Susan Miller noticed several customers pretending to read menus while secretly watching the booth. She quietly reminded a young waitress to continue serving everyone normally, although even she found herself glancing toward the parking lot every few moments. Less than 10 minutes passed before the peaceful rhythm outside the diner changed. A dark government sport utility vehicle entered the parking lot, followed closely by another official vehicle with federal license plates. Neither car displayed flashing lights, yet both carried the unmistakable appearance of official business. Every customer near the windows instinctively looked outside. Officer Ryan Mitchell noticed the vehicles first. "Cole," he said quietly, "I think someone is here." Both officers stepped toward the entrance as the first vehicle came to a smooth stop. Two individuals wearing neatly pressed Navy service uniforms exited with calm professionalism. Behind them, another man wearing civilian business attire stepped out carrying a leather portfolio. None of them appeared hurried. None of them appeared surprised. They simply walked toward the diner with the confidence of people who knew exactly why they had been called. The front door opened, and the taller officer looked around the room only once before his attention settled immediately on Marcus Reed. His expression softened into one of genuine respect. Walking directly toward the booth, he stopped beside Marcus and offered a crisp salute. "Good morning, Master Chief Reed. Lieutenant Commander David Brooks. I apologize that your family's mourning has been interrupted." Marcus stood and returned the greeting with quiet professionalism before shaking the commander's hand. "Thank you for coming, Commander. I appreciate your time." Every conversation inside the diner came to a complete stop. Officer Cole looked from Marcus to the Navy officer, suddenly realizing that the quiet father he had questioned for nearly half an hour was being addressed with a level of respect that could not be misunderstood. Yet even now, Marcus showed no trace of triumph. His first concern was not himself, but his family, as he gently smiled at Maya and Tyler, silently assuring them that the uncertainty filling the diner was finally beginning to give way to the truth. Lieutenant Commander David Brooks turned toward Officer Ethan Cole with calm professionalism before reaching into his portfolio and removing an official identification folder. "Officer," he said evenly, "I understand you requested employment verification from Master Chief Marcus Reed." Cole nodded, his confidence noticeably diminished. "Yes, sir. Dispatch informed us that his records required federal authorization." Commander Brooks handed over a document bearing official Navy credentials. "That is correct. Master Chief Reed currently serves as a Navy SEAL assigned to a specialized command. Certain portions of his service record are restricted because of the nature of his duties. Those restrictions exist to protect both operational security and the individuals who serve under those conditions." Cole carefully examined the identification before returning it. "I was not aware." Brooks answered respectfully. Very few people are expected to be. The civilian official standing beside him introduced himself next. Good morning. My name is Richard Collins. I serve as legal liaison for Naval Special Warfare personnel assigned within this region. I am here simply to verify that Master Chief Reed has fully cooperated throughout this encounter. Susan Miller quietly stepped closer, unable to hide her relief as the uncertainty that had filled her diner slowly began to disappear. Around the room, customers exchanged astonished glances as they realized the quiet father who had spent the last half hour comforting his children was far more than an ordinary government employee. Marcus remained exactly the same man he had been before anyone learned the truth. He thanked Commander Brooks for coming before sitting back beside Angela and the children. Maya looked at her father with wide eyes. "Dad?" she asked softly. "You never told us people would come like this." Marcus smiled gently. "Because I never wanted my work to become more important than being your father." Tyler looked toward the Navy officers with amazement. "So you really help protect people?" Marcus nodded. "I work with many good men and women who dedicate their lives to serving others. That is enough for today." Commander Brooks smiled at the children before turning back toward the officers. "Master Chief Reed has served with distinction for many years. More importantly, he has earned a reputation for exceptional judgment under pressure. I can personally assure you that the calm you witnessed this morning is entirely consistent with the man we know." Those words echoed through the diner with remarkable weight. Every customer silently reflected on the previous 30 minutes, remembering how Marcus had answered every question respectfully, comforted his children, thanked the employees, and never once allowed frustration to replace dignity. Officer Ryan Mitchell slowly nodded as though several unanswered questions had finally found their explanation. Officer Cole remained quiet for several moments before speaking directly to Marcus. "Mr. Reed, I appreciate your cooperation throughout this process." Marcus met his eyes without resentment. "Thank you, officer." Cole hesitated before continuing. "You could have mentioned your military service much earlier." Marcus answered with complete sincerity. "Respectfully, officer, I hoped it would not be necessary. Every citizen deserves to be treated fairly before anyone knows what uniform they wear, what position they hold, or what they have accomplished." The simple statement settled over the room with greater force than any raised voice ever could. Even Commander Brooks offered a small nod of agreement. Angela quietly reached for Marcus's hand beneath the table, proud not because others had finally recognized his service, but because he had remained faithful to the values that service had taught him. As sunlight continued shining through the diner windows, the atmosphere felt completely different from the one that had existed less than an hour earlier. Suspicion had quietly given way to understanding, and for the first time that morning, everyone present was no longer looking at Marcus Reed as a man they needed to question. They were looking at him as a husband, a father, a servant of his country, and above all, a man whose greatest strength had never been hidden inside his military record, but inside the quiet dignity with which he carried himself every single day. After Lieutenant Commander David Brooks and Richard Collins completed the verification, the atmosphere inside Maggie's Corner Diner gradually returned to normal, yet nobody seemed eager to leave. The breakfast rush had become an unforgettable lesson witnessed by dozens of ordinary people. Officer Ryan Mitchell quietly stepped aside to answer a call from police headquarters, explaining that the situation had been resolved without incident. Only a few moments later, his expression grew more serious as he listened. He thanked the caller, ended the conversation, and approached Officer Ethan Cole. "The chief has been notified," Mitchell said quietly. "He wants a complete report before the end of the day. He also requested that both body camera recordings be preserved along with dispatch communications." Cole nodded silently. He understood the importance of preserving every detail exactly as it had occurred. There had been no threats, no resistance, and no disturbance created by the Reed family. The recordings would simply show a father answering questions with patience while protecting the peace of his wife and children. Richard Collins acknowledged the update with a professional nod. "That is the appropriate procedure. Accurate documentation protects everyone involved." Marcus remained seated beside his family, showing no interest in escalating the situation or assigning blame. Susan Miller returned carrying four freshly prepared breakfast plates. "These are on the house," she said warmly. "Your original breakfast deserved better than getting cold." Marcus smiled gratefully. That is very generous, Susan, but we are happy to pay. Susan gently shook her head. Please let us do this. Your family has always treated every employee here with kindness. We would like to return that kindness today. Angela thanked her sincerely while Tyler looked at the warm pancakes with renewed excitement. Maya smiled for the first time since the officers had approached their table. Around the diner, several customers quietly expressed their support with friendly smiles and respectful nods. One elderly woman paused beside the booth before leaving. Young man, she said to Marcus, your children learned something very important from you today. Marcus answered humbly, I hope they learned that respect is strongest when it is offered even during difficult moments. The woman smiled before walking toward the door. Officer Ethan Cole finally stepped closer to the table once again. His voice carried none of the certainty with which he had begun the morning. Mr. Reed, I have spent a great deal of time thinking over everything that happened here today. Marcus looked up calmly. I appreciate that, officer. Cole continued carefully. Regardless of how this encounter began, you remained respectful from beginning to end. I recognize that. Marcus gave a small nod. Thank you. There was no celebration, no demand for recognition, and no attempt to embarrass anyone. Commander Brooks quietly observed the exchange with approval. Professional accountability, he knew, always began with honest reflection rather than defensiveness. Before leaving, Richard Collins handed Officer Mitchell a business card. If your department requires any additional verification regarding today's events, please contact my office directly. Mitchell accepted it gratefully. Outside the diner, the federal vehicles departed as quietly as they had arrived, attracting little attention from passing traffic. Inside, customers slowly returned to ordinary conversations, but the tone had changed. People who had entered expecting nothing more than coffee and breakfast now carried home a reminder that appearances could never reveal the whole story. Marcus watched Tyler laugh over another bite of pancakes and listened as Maya excitedly resumed talking about the aquarium. In that simple moment, he realized the morning had not truly been about proving who he was. It had been about preserving the sense of security his children deserved. Long after uniforms, titles, and official records faded from memory, that quiet lesson would remain with them far longer than anything written inside a government file. By the time the Reed family stepped outside Maggie's corner diner, the morning sun had climbed higher over Norfolk, filling the parking lot with warm light that seemed to erase the tension left behind inside the restaurant. Tyler raced a few steps ahead toward the family sport utility vehicle before stopping to wait for his parents, while Maya walked quietly beside Marcus, slipping her hand into his without saying a word. Angela smiled as she watched both children, grateful that the fear which had briefly entered their morning had already begun to fade. Before Marcus reached the driver's door, Officer Ethan Cole approached one final time. This time there was no uncertainty in his expression, only quiet humility. Mr. Reed, he said sincerely, before you leave, I want to apologize for the way this morning unfolded. I understand now that my assumptions allowed me to continue asking questions long after the facts no longer supported them. I cannot change what happened, but I can learn from it. Marcus looked at the officer for a moment before extending his hand. Thank you for saying that, officer. Learning is how every profession becomes stronger. Cole accepted the handshake with genuine appreciation. I hope your family enjoys the rest of your day. Marcus smiled warmly. I believe we will. As the officer stepped away, Police Chief Michael Donovan arrived in an unmarked department vehicle after being briefed on the situation. He greeted Commander Brooks and Richard Collins, who had remained only long enough to ensure every official matter had concluded properly. The chief then approached Marcus with calm professionalism. Master Chief Reed, I wanted to personally thank you for your patience and cooperation this morning. I have already requested a complete administrative review of the encounter, including dispatch communications and body camera recordings. Every interaction deserves to be examined carefully so that we continue improving the trust between our officers and the community they serve. Marcus nodded respectfully. I appreciate your commitment, Chief. Accountability protects everyone, including good officers who work hard every day. Donovan smiled. That is exactly the goal. After a final handshake, the chief turned toward Officer Cole and quietly instructed him to report to the station later that afternoon to complete the required documentation. There was no public criticism, no humiliation, only the professional responsibility that follows every significant encounter. As the Reed family climbed into their vehicle, Maya looked at her father from the back seat. "Dad, are you glad people finally knew who you were?" Marcus adjusted the rearview mirror before answering. "I'm glad they learned who we all are. We are a family that deserves the same respect as every other family." Tyler leaned forward between the seats. "Even if nobody knew you were in the Navy?" Marcus smiled. "Especially then." Angela reached over and gently squeezed his hand as he started the engine. They drove away from the diner toward the aquarium they had planned to visit from the very beginning, refusing to allow one difficult morning to steal the memories they still intended to make together. Inside the diner, customers slowly returned to ordinary conversations, yet many would remember the quiet father who never raised his voice, never demanded special treatment, and never used his accomplishments to prove his worth. His greatest victory had not been the arrival of military officials or the confirmation of an extraordinary career. It had been showing his children that dignity does not depend on recognition, and that true character remains steady long before the world discovers the truth. Some people wear a uniform that earns immediate respect. Others carry honor so quietly that it is invisible until tested. On that ordinary Saturday morning, the badge represented authority, but the father represented something even greater. He reminded everyone who witnessed the moment that justice begins when we choose to see the humanity in another person before we judge the story we have not yet taken the time to understand.